Mulcharmy is actually a terrible Yu-Gi-Oh card.
Oh no!
Yeah, that's right. I just threw $140 around and I'm not picking it up. Hey, I actually don't even know where I put it. It's actually gone. Today, big dog, me and chat are going to be talking about why this card isn't as good as players think and why it isn't worth the $140 price tag. Let's go ahead and jump on in. No, seriously, where did you put that card? What's going on with ya, big dog? And it is an amazing day for Yu-Gi-Oh! I hope that your day phenomenal. But if it isn't, don't let what happened at the beginning of your day ruin the rest of your day. Now, this is going to be a really fun video because I know that there's going to be different types of opinions. There's going to be the opinions of players who think that this card is really good, the opinions of players that are using the opinions of other players to justify their opinion.
Okay.
Then the opinions of players that play this card, and also the opinions of players that can't afford this card. Basically, I think it's going to be an entire melting pot in a really interesting discussion because Mulcharmy Fuwalus is a game-defining card, but not in the way that you think. I actually think that this card isn't as good as people are giving it credit, but it does have a place in Yu-Gi-Oh! And could potentially change how Yu-Gi-Oh! Is played entirely. But let's go ahead and talk about what the card does, its strengths, and its weaknesses really quick. In case you've been living under a rock, Mulcharmy Fuwalus is a level 4 winged beast monster that while you control no cards, you can discard it from your hand, and anytime your opponent summons from the deck or extra deck, you get to draw a card. A lot of people think that Mulcharmy Fuwalus and Perulia are actually just like Maxi, but there are some noticeable differences. One, Mulcharmy Fuwalus requires you to have no cards in your hand. I think that it's a really good game design because this card is immediately a going second like Yu-Gi-Oh card, and it gives players that are going second a little bit more power. But the drawback to that is that you're going second. You tend not to want to do that. Let me break down some odds for Mulcharmy Fuwalus for you guys. If you're playing Mulcharmy Fuwalus, there is a 34% chance that you open it when going second. But the problem with that is that you actually need to be going second, meaning that you're playing either a going second Yu-Gi-Oh deck or you lost game one. There's also the percentage chance that your opponent could be playing counters to the card. 3 Ash Blossom and Joy's Spring shows up in just about almost every single Yu-Gi-Oh deck. Then there's Called by the Grave. But there's also the probability that your opponent can be playing Cross-Out Designators with the Fuwalus themselves. And saying that it's the side deck, it is a huge probability that your opponent could be doing that, and it's mainly because hand traps are still very existent in Yu-Gi-Oh! There is a decent amount of time that this card is not doing well, but let's add another compounding problem to it. Mulcharmy Fuwalus is not good against every single Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck, and players are increasingly playing more strategies that are not weak to Mulcharmy Fuwalus. There can be a particular time where you Mulcharmy Fuwalus and your opponent looks at you like you're dumb.
Hey pal, you just blowing from Stupid Town?
Hey, they proceed to not do anything to interact with the card and pass their turn, and congratulations. You start off with the exact same amount of cards as they've done. Then there's also the players that are just playing Triple Tactics Thrust. And Triple Tactics Thrust allows them to be able to set the counter trap card to be able to stop your entire deck. I want you guys to think of cards like Different Dimension Ground to be able to banish all your cards on your side of the field. Then there's cards like Dimensional Barrier to prevent you from synchro summoning against decks like Tenpai. And then there's even the card that I talked about a little earlier, Heavy Slump, giving you as many cards as possible and then making you shuffle your entire hand and drawing 2 cards. The card just has way too much counterplay to be considered worth $150. It's not a game-changing card in any way, shape, or form. A lot of players are regulating to the sideboard because it's not good against so many matchups, and it actually reminds me of Nibiru the Primal Being. As you guys already know, Nibiru the Primal Being is a god-tier Yu-Gi-Oh card, but it's good because of how it changes the game, not because it's actually a good card on its own. Now, granted, just like how Nibiru made certain decks almost completely unplayable because it loses to Nibiru, Mulcharmy Fuwalus does the exact same thing. It makes those decks that were ultra reliant on the extra deck, giving them a do or die situation, significantly worse. But it also promotes deck building and other type of strategies that don't need the extra deck or special summoning from the deck. Then there's other decks that just don't care, like Ritual Beast. Ritual Beast puts your opponent on, hey, you better have the out, because I'm just going to summon Archnemesis Protoss and declare the attribute of the deck you're playing anyways. Not to mention, it could still do the Triple Tactics Thrust thing. True, people be thinking the counter to the counter to the counter to the counter. Bro, that's what I'm saying. Fuwalus is not that good. I actually even dislike how limiting deck building has become right now, but that's for a totally different story. This reminds me of last format when Yu-Gi-Oh players thought that Mulcharmy Fuwalus was a really good card, only for when it was used against some of the best players in the game. They just figured out how to make their entire full combo and not give you any cards in your hand. Both the Mulcharmys can be a crazy good Yu-Gi-Oh card, but in actuality, they're not as good as players are thinking. It's lingering effects that give too much advantage. I think you do have a point there. Anytime we have cards that have lingering effects, they've proven themselves to be ridiculously powerful. I think cards like Artifact Lancia, Droll and Lockbird, and of course the Mulcharmy cards are not great card design because there's no way to interact with these cards after they've already resolved. Ironically, Droll is also a counter to the Mulcharmy cards too. Same reason Summon Limit, Skill Drain, etc. got banned. Lingering effects that just go crazy. It's perplexing that Konami does limit those type of cards and then goes ahead and makes game design with these particular cards, which push out those fan favorite decks from being played. But in all honesty, I don't even think that these cards are good enough to be in the same category as the cards we just mentioned. Now, what I absolutely love about Mulcharmy Fuwalus and Mulcharmy Fuwalus is that it does bring a certain hint of game design, which I think is really important. I think that these cards are necessary for Yu-Gi-Oh because it gives a reason to be able to play some of those decks that are Entry deck reliant. Decks like Vanquish Soul, Centurion, Runic Stun, take your ass home, bro. I guess Runic Stun, Pure Fire Kings, Mermail. All of those decks now have a bigger purpose inside of Yu-Gi-Oh because they're not as susceptible to cards like Mulcharmy Fuwalus. It actually makes playing this card bad going against because a player dedicated 3 slots to this card to see more cards, but unfortunately it doesn't work against this deck. It's the genuine beauty about this card. It's good enough to be impactful, but not good enough to be a must-play Yu-Gi-Oh card, at least not in my opinion. And to further my point, there were actually quite a few Yu-Gi-Oh strategies at YCS Niagara that did not play any Mulcharmy whatsoever, and they did decently well. So for the guys that are saying Yu-Gi-Oh is completely unplayable unless you invest $450, I think that that's a little bit of a stretch. Decks with Mulcharmy Fuwalus did do better. The big question is, did it do better because of Fuwalus, or did it do better because it's a good deck that just so happens to play Fuwalus? Players were already assuming that Snake Eyes was going to be the strongest deck in the game. And ironically, Snake Eyes is incredibly weak to Mulcharmy Fuwalus. How did it wind up getting first place still? Why did it do so well? Well, I think partially because it was Droll and Lockbird, but also the deck did adapt to the format. Fire King cards allow you to be able to establish a board without going into the extra deck too much. And then also, you still must draw Mulcharmy Fuwalus. You pay the same amount for the one card you'll pay for a full meta deck, main deck, and extra deck that doesn't need it in Tenpai, for example. The thing is that this deck doesn't really even help rogue strategies. It just kind of addresses one thing that's been a problem in Yu-Gi-Oh: special summoning from the deck, and also special summoning from the extra deck. Damn, Sky Striker didn't play it, it was second place. Tenpai Dragon played it, obviously. Labyrinth played it, but I don't even think it was necessary for them. But then when you get to like the other top cut decks, some decks did not play it at all, or just side decked it. What's crazy enough is I think that cards like Dominus Purge are a little bit stronger anyways. When you play cards like Dominus Purge, you can almost kind of cook. I think one of the biggest problems in Yu-Gi-Oh right now is that people just panic because they look at the OCG and automatically just assume that things are going to be the same way. A couple of things that are different from the OCG and the TCG is 1, Maxi. 2, they can get those Mulcharmy cards a lot cheaper. And 3, obviously, we're in a totally different format. There have been tons of things that have transferred over and have not been good. And even the way that other regions play Yu-Gi-Oh is just different. It's the reason why self-loathing idiot Americans think that Europe is actually worse because they play Yu-Gi-Oh different. But now I think it's best to move away from our logical thinking people and then move to Reddit because, of course, they always have a pretty good opinion here, right? Are we ever going to be able to afford to play the game anymore? Sheesh, God. Starting off, this is what my local card shop is selling for pre-order, $220. Well, actually, Mulcharmy Fuwalus is $140. It's not $220. Reddit, of course, is always right, guys. Ah, yes, the affordable reprint that people have been waiting for, SP Little Knight and Thrust, because those are affordable over a year later. Time to unpack the birds one more time. I know the game has seen expensive metas in the past, but it feels like this has gotten significantly worse since Age of Overlord. All of the progress Rarity Collections has made has been wiped out, and then some by Snake Eyes, Fiendsmith, this, and even Tier 2 rogue strategies are requiring $20 to $30 cards. Yu-Gi-Oh has made itself an expensive game yet again, but that doesn't mean that we always have to follow the trends. It also means that we should always think differently and we should look to aspire to help others when we're in need. That's the biggest reason why I made this video, because I'm not sure about Mulcharmy Fuwalus. I don't think it's a great Yu-Gi-Oh card, and not only have I done the data and the research, I've also done the testing itself. $140, just a little bit too much. Maybe if it were like a $30 to $50 card, I think it would be justifiable. But hey, what do I know? Let me know down below what you think.